Hello, everybody.
Good morning. We have 22 so far, and we have 59 registered, so we'll see how that goes. It's good to see everybody's faces. Welcome to the 26th annual meeting. I just want to remind everyone to keep themselves muted if they're not speaking. And I'd like to share the agenda with you. If Julie, you could go to the next slide. So you know what's happening today. In the first half hour, if you could go back one, right. In the first half hour, we're gonna talk about where SJCA is and where it's going. And then we'll have a performance interlude where we're lucky enough to have Jackie Jonas join us. And then we have our featured presentation, Centering Equity, with Bria Heidelberg and Ruby Lopez Harper. So we hope to conclude by 12:45 or maybe even before. It's a long time on the on a Zoom, but I think you're really going to enjoy our featured speakers. Julie, actually, if you could go to the next slide. Before we, it's always rushed at the end, so I just wanted to thank first our board members. They have been, through this difficult time for everyone. They have their own organizations that they need to attend to, and they've been very generous with their time in helping us get through this crisis as well. So thank you to the SJCA board members. And Julie, next slide. And I also want to thank our supporters, the State Council on the Arts. If you want to go back one more slide, Julie. The New Jersey State Council on the Arts, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and Ocean First have all been very generous with their support. We also have in-kind support from the Pro Bono Partnership, the Stockton University, Rowan University, and Catch a Fire. I also really want to thank Julie. We're the tag team for SJCA. If you want to go to the next slide, so they could see our beautiful faces. And we're also very excited to welcome four new interns, but here we have Miguel Bourbon, Erica Perez, and Christine Say. And we're very excited to have them aboard. You'll hear about what we're using them for. They will be very involved in our cultural asset mapping. So next we have Noreen Scott-Garrity, our fearless leader, who will be reflecting on her time as chair for the last 4 years. So I want to introduce Noreen Scott-Garrity, our outgoing board president. Noreen, are you with us?
Sorry, you'd think after 6 months we would figure the mute button out. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 26th annual meeting. I was trying to think how many of them I've actually been to. Probably at least 3/4 of them, if not more, but I digress. So I wanted to just briefly, because I know we have a very packed program this morning, briefly reflect on my 4 years as chair. And don't worry, I won't break out in song. I'm definitely no Christina Aguilera. But I do feel that I'm handing over the chair position at a very interesting time for both for SJCA and for everyone, which was not necessarily the plan, but there it is. So initially, we've grown a lot. There have been a lot of accomplishments over the last several years. Initially, it was definitely smooth sailing. In 2016, we had a fairly new executive director, Karen Pinzolo. We had new office digs at Kramer Hall in Hamilton, beautiful office space. We revamped the Encore Awards for those of you who've been attending those in the spring, and made them a much more engaging and fun event, which I'm always up for. And we launched a strategic planning process over the last couple of years, which I'll talk more about in a moment. We began our journey with Of, By, and For All, which you're going to hear more about from the people more projecting onto the future. And we've added and reached out to a lot of new members and hope to do more of that over the next couple of years. And then, of course, we all know that in March 2020, things came initially to a screeching halt. Unfortunately, the arts and culture sector, like every other sector, has been impacted by COVID closings, and we've certainly, if nothing else, were put into hibernation. Things are starting to come back to life. Some museums and galleries have been open. Some theaters have been open with outdoor performances, and some are starting to open indoors with all kinds of safety precautions in place. So there are definitely signs of life in the sector. But those of you who are familiar with the Keep Jersey Arts Alive campaign, that's helping get that message out. So check that out too. So it's been an interesting and exciting time, but also a time that I think we have an opportunity to build during this, maybe a slight hiatus, and to build a more equitable and inclusive cultural community in South Jersey, which is where this organization is heading. So back to the strategic planning process briefly, we will resume that this fall. Will be completed over the next couple of months, because we're not starting from scratch. We had already laid a lot of the groundwork. So we can hit the ground running to finish that up, especially now that we know more clearly what direction we're going in. So I just want to thank the South Jersey Cultural Alliance staff, Karen Pinzolo and Julie Hain, and to my colleagues on the board, who I can't thank enough. Thank you all so much for your support over the last several years. And don't worry, I'm actually not really going anywhere. I remain on the board, and I absolutely support the new leadership in any way I can. This will be a peaceful transfer. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and take a moment to announce our new slate for the year, which of course is always one main area of business at every organization's annual meeting. So we have, for the leadership slate, you can see in front of you, Cori Solomon, Appel Arts Music Campus. First Vice President, Lisa Honecker, Arts and Humanities at Stockton University. Second Vice President, Melanie Stewart, College of Performing Arts, Rowan University. Treasurer, Pam Brandt, Symphony and C. Secretary, Susan Gogan, Wheaton Arts. I would remain on the slate or in the executive committee as ex officio, as the outgoing chair, and board member at large, Tim Hart from Ocean County Cultural and Heritage Commission. We're also very pleased to be adding 2 new trustees to the slate. You can see their names and credentials briefly there. We're very excited about that, about increasing the board at this time. Bill May is an incredible advocate for arts education, and now is in South Jersey. He's a photographer, musician, and was a former art supervisor at Newark Public Schools. So we're thrilled to have Bill join the board. And then secondly, our other new trustee is Samir Nichols, who is both a theater and dance artist. works a lot in the Camden community where I'm cited also. He's executive director of the Superior Arts Institute and a commissioner with the Camden County Cultural and Heritage Commission. He's also, he was recently seen on an Artpride, one of the Friday webinars about how to engage the cultural community with local and county government resources. So we think he will be a great addition in terms of that, how to boost the local art scene, because I think that's in many ways where a lot of things are headed. So we're really thrilled to have these two new folks join our crew, and we look forward to meeting with them. Now, mind you, they are so new. I believe they are joining us in our meeting today, but they are not yet even onboarded. That's how fresh the ink is on this. So the board has already voted and passed the slate of officers, but what we typically do at the annual meeting is ratify the vote with the membership who's on the call. So Julie has just popped up a question for you to respond to. Do you support the slate of officers and new board members as shown on the current slide? So if everyone could please vote and submit that right away so that we can get this piece of business taken care of and move on with our meeting. Okay, hopefully everybody could see the poll and will respond to the poll. So I suppose we can come back and announce officially, but we will know soon the results of the poll. And so in the meantime, I'm going to literally pass the torch, even though I'm really sorry that I can't be with all of you in person because I miss everyone so much, but I'm going to pass the torch to our, sorry, train going by my house, to the next SJCA President of the Board, Cori Solomon from Appel Arts Music Campus. Take it away, Cori.
Thank you so much, Noreen, and thank you again to everything that you've done for the Cultural Alliance over the past 5 years, and actually decades. I know you've been involved with this from, you know, the very beginning, as so many of you on the call have. So I just want to reiterate that thanks and gratefulness. So I am so honored to be in this position, and I just wanted to introduce myself to those of you I haven't met. I look forward to hopefully having a relationship with you in the future. I get to run Appel Farm on a daily basis, and though we're not really a farm anymore, we do have an on-site charter school here that we started that is focused on arts integration. And every day it keeps us busy and hopping with new and fun things. And actually the storm last night caused a whole bunch of the power lines, poles in front of the school to fall down. And we had to call school off today and have a virtual school day. So lots of excitement every day, but in general, it's really wonderful to be in this region. And in my role as Executive Director of Appel Farm, I have realized the importance of this idea of the Cultural Alliance, that we needed, and we still do need, something for all of us in this region to have a collective voice and truly an alliance. And so I am so excited to begin this journey in this leadership role and hopeful that we can continue building out the people that are included in this and having a real focus and centering this idea of inclusion and equity and really tying that into all of our work, which is something I'm really passionate about and is a part of our core mission here. So I'm excited, and I hope to meet all of you. So I have the honor also of telling you a little bit more about the work that the Cultural Alliance has been doing. And as Noreen talked about, over the past year, we went through a strategic planning process and recognized the need to diversify who's involved in this alliance, and really recognizing who wasn't at the table, and how are we serving this region of cultural and arts, not just organizations, but artists and all of the people that we know really create this thriving region that we live in. So one of the first steps that we did was join the Of, By, For All Change Network run by Nina Simon, who was the guest speaker at our last month's virtual membership meeting. And the Change Network helps cultural nonprofits worldwide become more inclusive. And so they have helped us create this diverse committee that's actually starting by engaging emerging Latinx artists in Atlantic County of New Jersey. And so the work so far has created a draft change plan that's created by this really wonderful mix of people from the community and leaders and nonprofit leaders and artists that could, because you're a part of that, create a change plan. So I think now the next step is to put a lot more details and specifics and goals into that plan so that it can be affected into that area and hopefully make real change and for some positive growth. So the other things that we've been doing, obviously you're on a board level and making a commitment to diversify our board in the future and the staff, and obviously responding in this age of accountability that we have all experienced over the past few months through the Black Lives Matter movement and just trying to create more awareness and also being a resource for any of you who are members. And if you're not a member, I'd encourage you to join, and we'll make a plug for that at the end again. But I do believe we've sent out some resources trying to address racial inequities in ways that every organization can, you know, try to have some growth in this area, and as we're all learning together. So another really exciting thing that has happened was Karen and Julie got to meet with the New Jersey Arts Administrators of Color and agreed to work on a directory of artists and arts administrators in South Jersey. And so Rowan University is going to help us with their GIS software to map the cultural assets of this region. And we'll be using their communication resources to help reach artists of color, and we'd love your help with that. Certainly the new interns that we've hired to help us do this work will be key in that success. But certainly everybody being involved will make it better. So that's happening. And then I think connected to that is this idea of our cultural assets mapping project. And so Stockton and the Change Network and Rowan are all going to be partners in this and helping us really affect this. And the assets map will obviously promote this cultural community, increase our information flow to and from the entire sector. We're going to try to measure the cultural vitality so that we can use that as an advocacy point for funding and future support, and obviously encouraging equity, inclusion, and just collecting the data and stories that we know come out of South Jersey so that we can keep trying to change the narrative about what South Jersey is and can be, to just improving the positive things that we know are happening down here. So that's a really exciting project. I hope that you will be involved in that. And it's a part of the theme that I know strategically SJCA wants to, and we want to grow this as being this hub of information and resources for artists and communities and organizations that are related to cultural and the arts, and a convener of those people so that we can be stronger together, right? That there's assumptions in how we work together that will help us thrive in a community together. So one of the other things that's connected to that is our Arts Education Resource Directory, which is going to roll out this fall. And that again is reaching into communities and trying to identify these arts and history and cultural organizations and artists and cultural venues and festivals and municipalities and the arts councils on a local level, and how does that connect to the arts education happening in our region for our youth. So the value of strengthening and diversifying this is the major effort here. And again, if you want to be involved, please reach out. So in general, the central theme here is obviously about our equity and our inclusion of all of the people in this region for the sake of helping to make us stronger. And obviously we've had some successes. Yesterday there was, and I want to thank Anne-Marie Miller for her work with this, but the state budget was just signed, and it included an increase for the first time in decades for the State Arts Council, which I believe several of your organizations are tied to. So that budget is up from 16 million to 19.858 million. And that funding obviously is going to trickle down, and part of SJCA's role is to keep advocating for more funding for all of the great things that you guys are doing. The other big news that I wanted to share is yesterday it was posted about the New Jersey Arts Recovery Fund, which Julie just threw the link in the chat. Thank you, Julie. And that recovery fund is for organizations, but it also, organizations can apply for money for artists and to support the artists that obviously this has really been difficult for all of you, those of you who are working, teaching artists and artists. So I know that there's several organizations that are planning on coordinating those efforts to make sure that we're able to reach artists like Apple Farm and young audiences, and I'm sure there's others. And so be reaching out to whatever organizations you're connected to if you're a teaching artist, and so that you can be able to access some of those funds to help during this COVID time. The other plug I want to put in is for Artpride, and they're currently doing a survey. And I think Julie's, can you throw the link in the chat for the survey? But it closes October 14th, and the more information we can give to our statewide partner in this will help our advocacy efforts and help inform all of the work that's happening in the background. So in general, this is just a really exciting time, I think. Despite everything that's going on, obviously COVID has been really hard, and I have 3 kids, and we've gone through it all with the quarantine and the shutdown, and you know, our organization has gone through some tough times, and we have an overnight summer camp that we didn't get to have this summer, which was heartbreaking and financially devastating, and I'm in this with you. But I think where I'm at right now, and I hope to help guide in this role of SJCA, is that through every terrible thing that happens, our human nature helps us to make great things come out of it. And we have breakthrough moments in crises, and we're in a crisis. And I think this gives us an opportunity to really think differently and challenge ourselves to think outside of the box and figure out what new breakthroughs can come through and out of this. And certainly the accountability of equity and inclusion is so important, and it's an exciting opportunity to really make some things right that haven't been right in a long time in our society, but also for this region, and really turning this around and seeing these opportunities for growth. So I'm excited to go through this with you, and obviously this is such an unknown time, and I'm not sure what's going to come out of this, but I promise you that we'll be adaptive. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's going on in your lives, and in what do you need, and so we can be adaptive in trying to help fill those gaps. And so stay in touch with us. I'm going to put another plug at the end of our meeting for our monthly stuff that you can be involved in. But thank you to all of you for just showing up today. That's exciting, and I hope you'll stay involved and help us do this important work. So thank you. So I'm going to pass this to Karen now that I've been rambling time. And Karen is going to introduce, we have a performance for you to spice up this meeting.
You're on mute, Karen.
Thank you, Cori. We are so excited to have you aboard. We're looking forward to working with you. And before Cori decided to take this job on, she talked to me for, well, we talked for over an hour, and our ideas are so aligned. So I'm so excited about what's to come in the next few years. Well, we, in 2018, the Arts Ed New Jersey did a survey for us from the Arts Education Census. And what we found was that in South Jersey, we lag behind Central Jersey and North Jersey in community relations, in that the number of artist residencies, assemblies, and field trips are lagging behind the rest of the state. When they also surveyed why, what are the barriers? And the barriers seem to be information. So with the help of Ocean First and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, we created an online cultural directory, cultural arts education directory. And we have, today we're going to launch it, and we're going to launch it with and celebrate with a performance. But as you all know, it's 2020, and our artist isn't with us today. Karen Abdul-Leek, Queen Noor, was had to step out on Monday because she's doing a presentation with young audiences and is having trouble with the technology. So we replaced her with somebody from the, not that you could replace Queen Noor, but we replaced her with a storyteller from the Patchwork Network, Storytelling Network, who's a member of SJCA. But Julie, is she on board by any chance? No, okay. So we'll go, I saw Bria online.
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. We're so happy to have you.
Lord.
We're so happy to have you. So we all love a good story. Stories awaken us, heal us, and give us a window into each other's experiences. And as a palate cleanser to go from the business of SJCA to the inspiration of our featured speakers, SJCA would like to present some of the South Jersey's best to transport, transform, and open you up for what is to follow. Jackie Jonas, as I mentioned, a member of the Patchwork Storytellers Guild, an SJCA member, learned to tell stories at her grandmother's knee. Born into a family of gospel singers, preachers, and just plain good old talkers, she learned the power of story early on. Jackie believes that stories have the power to transform and heal and to clarify and guide. We teach our children through stories, we explain ourselves with stories, and we learn about others through the stories they tell us. And so to celebrate, thank you, Jackie, for being here to launch this and help us celebrate our Arts Education Directory. Jackie Jonas, please uplift our spirits.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Oh, perfect. So I've been watching this meeting, and having done a lot of Zoom work, I just want to say that I understand that you didn't know I was here. It happens all the time. But I am here, and I do have a story for you. I understand that your theme is inclusivity, and I am the poster child for inclusivity, and I have been since I was 6 years old. I grew up in a little southern town, And it was a typical Southern town in Tennessee. In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education was passed, and with glacial speed, my county complied, so that by 1964, they decided to integrate their schools. This meant something to me. First of all, you have to know that I was one of those children who one parent loved and the other parent rolled their eyes at. My father thought I was a genius. My mother thought I was a pain in the tuchus. Because all I wanted to do was learn to read. From the time I figured out that those squiggles on the page meant something, I wanted to learn to read. And I drove my mother insane. And then one day, she said to me, "You're gonna learn to read." I was ecstatic. How? She said, "You're going to school." And I thought, I'm going to Hampton with all my cousins and my friends and everybody. I was going to go to Hampton, the black school on my side of town. I could see it from my house. And in August, my mother said, "We're going to go register." And she piled little me in the back of my Uncle Mac's cab, because he ran the black cab company in my town. And we drove past Hampton and pulled up in front of Oakmont Elementary, the white school. My mother walked me into those doors, and all I remember is her shoes on those the asbestos floor tiles. And I remember her hand going across the paper, and I remember her handing that paper to this white lady on the other side of the table. And in September, my mother piled my little self into the car, and we drove to Oakmont Elementary while my friends went to Hampton. I remember the doors creaking open, and there was this long hallway with blue cinder block walls going all the way down. It seemed like forever. And at the end of that hallway was a gray mountain. We walked toward the gray mountain, and on the feet of the gray mountain were those black shoes that the Wicked Witch from the West in The Wizard of Oz wore. And my eyes went up the floral expanse of the gray mountain to the head of the gray mountains, and her gray steely eyes, and the gray mountain bent down and said, "My name is Miss Opal Dean, and I'm gonna be your teacher." I did not want Miss Opal Dean to be my teacher. And I grabbed my mother's hand and squeezed as hard as I could, and my mother let my hand go. And Miss Opal Dean marched me into the front of that classroom and plunked me right down. And she walked back to her desk like everything was absolutely okay and began to teach. She said, "Boys and girls, I know your mothers have been working with you all summer on the packet we sent out, and I want to know what you've learned." She said, "Does anybody know the ABC song?" And my hand shot up, but I put it back down. But she'd seen me. Miss Opal Dean always had eagle eyes. And she said, "Do you know the ABC song? Would you sing it for us?" You know the ABC song. Then sing the ABC song. "Why won't you sing the ABC song?" "Because my mama told me not to talk." And then a miracle happened. The mountain smiled, and Miss Opal Dean bent down and said, "Darling, she meant unless it was your turn, and it's your turn. A, B, C, D, E," at the top of my lungs. And that's why I always tell people that the ABC song, it's a freedom song, because it's the theme song of a relationship between a scared little brown girl and a gray mountain who decided to do the right thing.
I'm going to clap loud enough for the whole team. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Um, as a former public school teacher, my heart melts anytime a story is about teachers. So, and especially in this time when we know teachers are on the front lines and trying to overcome great hurdles with their children. And how many of you are also virtual teachers with your children at home right now? And so thank you, Jackie. That was really beautiful. So as we transition from that gorgeous performance, I am honored to introduce our next two speakers from Centering Equity. They are obviously aligned with the theme of what we're trying to accomplish this year, and rebuilding our organizations with an equity lens is going to be a key in sustainability of this South Jersey cultural community. And so how do we do that in this era of COVID and in light of a heightened focus of racial justice? And how do we ensure that organizations become anti-racist? And so please let me introduce these two phenomenal women, Dr. Bria Heidelberg and Ruby Lopez Harper, who both have years and years of experience with this work and share tons of accolades and leadership positions across the board. And their full bios can be found on our website and were included in the meeting invite. So I imagine you've read that. So without further ado, I would love to turn it over to Dr. Heidelberg and Ms. Harper. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, and thank you so much for having us. You know, we've got a pretty robust hour, I think, planned. Pretty lo-fi. We don't use a lot of PowerPoints. We really try to create an interactive moment. So we do invite you to drop your questions into the chat box as we're dialoguing. But also, if you have questions, you know, don't hesitate to jump in. This is really intended to be a conversation and really intended to invite reflection and hopefully participation. So, you know, Bria and I, you know, just to kind of tee things up, we wanted to share a little bit about who we are, why we talk about this, and chat a little bit about how important language is in this moment. We wanted to give a couple of different action items and philosophy around maybe the hiring process, talk a little bit about marketing and communications and creating opportunities, open some time for a Q&A, you know, so that for those of you that are processors like me, need a little bit of time to slow roll into the content, that is totally okay. We'll definitely have time at the end, but for those of you that get excited about what we're talking about, again, feel free to jump in. You know, a little bit of kind of overview. You know, Bria and I together have been colleagues for a really long time, which is always so amazing to be able to say, and so sobering when I reflect on where I am in my journey in the field and where I am in my journey with this work. We have always been really blessed to be able to talk together as open and as candidly as I think you'll just experience in a moment. But really in the reflection and in the observations as to women of color moving in a predominantly white field, and the ways that we each have developed. I am Mexican. I'm a mother. I've got 3 kids too. So woo, Cori, I feel ya. And you know, Bria will tell you all a little bit about herself as well. You know, but just the different ways that we've been experiencing our interactions in the field, if you will, that and in this moment, I think really drives us towards trying to inspire folks to action. You know, we've done a lot of talking over the last, I think, 20 years that I can track back in the field, and it's been a lot of talking. And I think we're now really in a moment where the time has come to act. We have talked enough. So hopefully, again, as I said, we'll be able to share with you some actionable items, things to inspire you to reflect more deeply and create a space where you feel excited to be participating. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Bria to just share a little bit about kind of her reflections on who we are, why we're here, and you know, the importance of language.
Hi everyone. So as Ruby said, my name is Bria Heidelberg. I know I was introduced as Dr. Heidelberg. My mom's called me that twice, and that's about it. So Bria is just fine. I am a professor of entertainment and arts management at Drexel. So I teach undergrads, which is another reason why it's totally okay for you to interrupt us and ask questions and make comments. Ruby and I have gotten fairly decent at trying to be equitably minded when we're hosting like Zoom chats. So if you post something in the chat that is for everyone, that's fine. Everyone can see it. If you feel more comfortable posting something directly to Ruby or myself, we will read the comments so that everybody can understand what we're responding to, but we won't attribute it to anybody. I will also be keeping an eye on the hands that are raised, but it's an imperfect science because Zoom hasn't gotten to the point where it naturally always raises that raised hand person to the top. So bear with us on that. But I do want to just let you know that we're keeping an eye out on the different ways that you might want to interact or communicate. So I come to equity work as a Black woman operating in some awesome spaces and some not so awesome spaces. I have a background in arts and cultural policy. My arts background is in dance. And as I was entering in the field and operating in the field, I realized that, hey, guess what? We don't do HR so good. So I went back to school and got a second master's in human resources so that I could understand what the things that I was seeing, the things that I was experiencing. For me, when I get angry, I want to understand a thing so that if I can at least say, oh, well, as so-and-so said in this citation, I am experiencing somebody being a jerk and it has this technical name. You know, it doesn't always fix the situation, but it helps me feel a little better. So that's why I support my very expensive educational habit. Language plays a large role in everything that we do in life, but especially when it comes to equity work. We can signal things, and I'm not talking just about virtue signaling, but I mean, we can identify with things, we can categorize things into what we're doing and out of what we're doing with a simple turn of phrase. We can invite people or disinvite people or bar people with the words that we use and the ways in which we use them. So that's really the foundation for a lot of the ways in which Ruby and I think about this work, chat about this work with wine late at night, critique Hamilton on a couch. So it's, you know, it applies to all facets of life. And with that, I think we'll jump right in.
Yeah, so, you know, I want to share a little bit of national context as we jump into our next kind of sharing section. The work that I do with Americans for the Arts sits squarely in local arts advancement, and since the onset of the pandemic, we've been monitoring very closely the impact not just on the financial nature of our field. Obviously, everyone, you know, I tend to be the angel of doom when I come into these conversations because I've got the worst information to share and the least happiest things to say. So I'll spare you the doom and gloom, but I will say this. In addition to monitoring the financial impact of what's happening, part of my role has been related to disaster preparedness, and disasters as they have been defined in the last 5 to 10 years has come to include not just natural disasters, so hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, pretty much everything that we're seeing right now, because the plagues are upon us. The 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse have arrived. You know, we've also come to include in that definition man-made disasters, and that encompasses civil unrest, terrorist attacks, active shooting situations, any type of violent act that's happening. And so the El Paso shooting that happened last year, things, I know in Trenton there was a significant, similar experience. So, things like that fall under the umbrella. So in addition to watching the financial impact of the pandemic, we've also been monitoring the protests as they relate to the murder of George Floyd, the in gross lack of justice for Breonna Taylor. And with that, we've also tried to track in survey form, of course, right? Everything has to be measurable in order to have context. And what we're finding in this moment, a lot of us were concerned. The field has been making strides. Some organizations are out in front, some organizations are sitting square in the middle, others are still trying to figure out which way to go, which I think is just the story of every journey that we're always on. And what we were worried was that the pandemic would not only derail equity efforts, but also create additional barriers. And it has in some instances, I think, as we see the pandemic affecting communities of color disproportionately, it continues to create more challenges. But what we're finding is that organizations are reporting back through the survey that this moment has given them an opportunity to re-entrench and find new ways to activate equity work within their infrastructure. In some cases, that means thinking about distribution of funding in a different way. In some ways, that has been how they've made their space available to support the community that is responding to the civil unrest. In other cases, it's about healing, it's about support, it's about finding different ways to be vocal and be present in this moment. To kind of start, so that's just kind of the big picture, that like we're all still struggling, we're all in this together, everybody's trying to figure it out, we're all dealing with the loss of significant resources, and yet I think the human spirit drives us towards continuing to find ways to center this work. So I know there were a few highlighted areas that Karen had hoped that we could touch on. So we're going to try to do that next. Staffing is going to be a big concern over the coming 18 to 24 months. And as we continue to think about staffing, as we continue to think about either maintaining or adjusting, or at some point when the clouds part and the sun begins to shine again, growing. Equity in the hiring process is one of the standard, I think, operationalizing, how do we make that happen and what are different ways? So I know Bria has a lot of insights around the HR process. So I'm going to share just a quick snippet of kind of what we've been doing at Americans for the Arts around equitable hiring practice. And so some of that for us has centered around a couple of things. We adopted the Rooney Rule, which is imperfect, which comes to us by way of the sports industry, that
Pittsburgh.
That you keep pushing at your candidate pool until you have representation from communities of color within that. And so we've been pretty steady. We don't always hit it on the head. I think that's, just part of the learning process and part of the it's okay, keep working process. It's not an excuse, and it doesn't reduce or diminish the efforts that we've dedicated to that. And what it has done is it has begun over the last 4 years to bring in more diverse candidates. What does that mean? We're seeing more individuals from communities of color. We're seeing it proliferated. Right now we're still struggling, like everybody else is, trying to get better representation within our senior leadership. But the broader staff is starting to reflect the demography of the country, which, you know, as a national organization can be a real challenge and continues to be a challenge. I'll talk a little bit later about some opportunities related to how we think about hiring and staffing, and share a tool that we've signed on to called the Cultural New Deal that outlines very specific action items and focus areas that can also help you think about how you're going to operationalize and integrate this into your organization. You know, the other thing that we've done is posted the salary on all of our job descriptions. It has been a call from the field, especially from administrators of color, for transparency around the salary for positions in order to eliminate bias and reduce the kind of work on the candidates of color to negotiate for equal pay. Coming up later this month, there's going to be a forum about equitable pay for Latinas who are still, you know, seeing, I think it's 54% of the dollar that a white male person makes, it takes us to make. There's other percentages for other communities. I encourage you to explore that. It's sobering. And so one of the ways to combat that and to respond to that is to make a call for organizations to post the salary on positions that you have open. And so those are two. I'm going to kick it over to Bria to share a little bit more.
Sure. So when thinking about hiring practices, you want to look at the entirety of your process, right? So the first thing that you're doing is usually determining, oh, we need to hire a person, right? So in that process, you're determining what tasks they're going to do, what skill sets you need, what knowledge you want them to have. This is usually the first step in what goes wrong snowball. As people begin to associate personality traits, and either I can tell in a position description if somebody's been burned before, because the position description can be written as, we hated this person that just left the position, so we're looking for somebody that is the exact opposite. If they liked blue, you better like red. If they said the sky is green, you better say it's purple. And that's not really about what you need them to do as a work function, right? So the first thing that you want to do is try to avoid presumptions about personality and the ways that you think somebody should go about doing the task that you need them to do. Position descriptions are amazing tools when used correctly and when used equitably. So definitely you want to make sure that you have your salary range there. This should be a conversation that's already had at your board. If you're a nonprofit, at the board level, how much, or, you know, with your finance person, how much money do we have to allocate to hiring somebody, whether they're hourly or salaried, if healthcare is included or not, payroll taxes, all of that good stuff should be considered prior to releasing a position description. You really want to make sure that you're maximizing the time that you have to find somebody. Why waste time going through the entirety of the search, the recruitment and selection process, only to get to the end and offer them a salary that they cannot make work with no wiggle room on your end. So just from a let's not waste each other's time perspective, having a set salary is a good thing. The other thing that you want to be mindful of when you're having a set salary is that it helps to keep you honest as well. Unconscious bias can sneak in many different ways whenever we're thinking about salary, who has the privilege and the knowledge to negotiate without being seen in a negative light, or without being, you know, penalized for speaking up and advocating for themselves. So let's just avoid all that by having a set salary range. And it can be a range, right? You can say from you know, maybe there's a $10,000 difference depending on what other things you might bring to the position. But having a range where people can identify, okay, I'm going to fall somewhere in between here, is the very least that you can do. A lot of these job posting boards are now requiring it. And I use that. At Drexel, we recently hired new faculty members in my program. And as a general rule, Drexel does not release salary ranges with their positions. I just said, you know what, you want to diversify staff, arts administrators of color, and the Arts and Culture Leader Network. Ruby, I can never remember all the letters. That is your thing. What is
Arts
it?
and Culture Leaders of Color Network.
Thank you.
You can find them on Facebook.
So yeah, both of those spaces are a great way to tap into some networks of arts administrators and artists of color. Both of them require you to include your salary on any position description that they will put forth. So I just use that as my cover. Like, I'm not going to fight with a higher admin person about the benefits of including salary and make somebody be equitable if they don't really want to do that work. I don't have that kind of time. I have other things to do. So I just use the fact that I can't post it in these diverse spaces without the salary range. And
So
that
let's
rule,
do that.
yeah, that rule did the work for me. So you can definitely use that as a way to move towards more equitable practices. I'm a very big proponent of however we get there. I love hearts and minds. By all means, if everybody believed that everybody else was a full human being, I would be all about it. But at the end of the day, I really just want you to act right at work and do what you're supposed to do. So you can go home and say and do whatever you would like at work. I'm gonna need you to act like an adult, an equitable adult.
You know, it's so funny, Brea, that you bring that up with the salaries, right? Like, so, you know, sometimes we aren't in spaces, even as, white allies and, white friends and colleagues. We're not in the spaces where we can have those conversations. And so knowing even where to point to say, oh, no, if we're going to do this, then this is a requirement. And it's not me, it's just what has to get done. But I think it's also important to note, and I'll share a funny story about salary ranges, that, be reasonable and be thoughtful in the range that you're sharing, because we got your number. And when folks post crazy ranges, which I remember seeing was it like a deputy director? It was like a senior leader position. And the organization posted some it was like $30,000 to $250,000. And it's like, come on, friend, like that's not even helpful. And it made the rounds because it was like, what is this ridiculousness? And it reminds me of like you put on a crazy outfit and you have to have some friend that loves you enough to tell you to go back inside and change. You want to have peers that support the work as well, and folks that you can confide in, and folks that you can say, hey, we're doing this. How does it hit with you? Not to say go, tap the shoulders of all your friends of color. Sometimes it's also work that you have to do with other white institutions, because this is a learning community. We are part of a bigger process. And if someone sees that you're doing it, you're leading by example. You're opening the conversation. You're making it okay for people to have these questions. And we're normalizing the process of reflection, and we're normalizing the process of growth. And I'm finding that a lot with some of the disaster work as well, that, as folks are worried about, having to close their doors or having to lay off staff, which we'll talk a little bit about later in our conversation, nobody wants to talk to anybody about that, but we have to. And if we do that, then maybe we could find solutions that get us to some other place than, well, lock the door, we're done. And finding out when it's already too late. So, a lot of these activities and a lot of these movements, a lot of these practices just get strengthened by conversation. And again, that transparency that, it's okay to not have the answers. What's not okay is not to try.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that I'll say is that when it comes to the requirements, your requirements for the position have got to match the salary. If you're requiring a master's degree, first of all, do they really need a master's degree, or are you looking for
coordinator? That's my favorite.
Yeah. Are you looking for skill sets that you're using proxy language? So when I say proxy language, I mean that a lot of people have preconceived notions about what it means to have a bachelor's degree and what that means for an individual as far as the qualifications or the knowledge or the skills or the abilities that they might have. as a college professor, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you might want to actually list the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you want those people to have, because I see some college graduates that are phenomenal, and I see some college graduates that are not. And as somebody that routinely runs into door frames for miscalculating exactly how wide I am, degrees do not make you smart. Right? Degrees just mean that you have a degree sometimes. And so the most equitable way to recruit people is to say, I need you to be able to do A, B, and C. And then it's up to that individual in their resume and their cover letter to demonstrate that they can do A, B, and C. If you're presuming that somebody can do A, B, and C just because you're saying that you require a 4-year college degree, then what you're doing is you're cutting off your candidate pool at the knees, because somebody might not have a college degree but can do A, B, C, D, E, and F based on their experiences in their community, their experiences volunteering, and their experiences working their way up through the ranks, perhaps without a college degree. So I think that's the biggest takeaway, is really look at a job that you want somebody to do and figure out exactly what skill sets you need to hire for, and write your position description using precise language that speaks to those things. If any of you are granting institutions or have ever had an experience with the granting institutions, grant applications are the exact same way. Do not use proxy language whenever you have a very specific thing that you're looking for from organizations. It's a surefire way to very quickly and efficiently be inequitable.
It is so interesting too, when you're talking about qualifications and, even scope, right? So some of the hiring process isn't just getting folks in, but it's about keeping them in. And, and I think some of these tactics just are across the board. If you're, hiring somebody that's overqualified for a position, eventually they're not going to be happy. They're not going to be satisfied. They're going to leave. And we know, as, just business model operation function, that rehiring and retraining is more costly than just bringing in the right person at the right scale and working with them and making sure that they have what they need in order to succeed. And in a lot of cases, it begins with that transparency, that, you're not asking for a master's degree and expecting a coordinator to do manager work, that your pay is appropriate for the work that's being asked, that the authority given to the position coincides with the work that they need to accomplish, both in and outside of the organization. And, a lot of times I think that we don't think about that in a holistic way. We think about, this is what we need, but we don't think about, how is that person going to come into this space and be able to successfully accomplish what we're asking them to do? And have we as an organization made all of those resources available? There's been a lot of talk inside Americans for the Arts around some of that very same thing, that as supervisors, we talk about, we have to hold our people accountable. And I'm like, wow, but shouldn't we reflect on our accountability first, to make sure that we're doing everything we should be doing to support the people that we work with? And, back to language is everything. Language is going to permeate every piece of our conversation today. I don't call them direct reports. I call them people I work with, because they're humans. And at the end of the day, I'm also responsible for stewarding an environment for them to be successful. And if I don't provide that, they will not succeed. And so how do I hold them accountable for not accomplishing the things that they're here and expected to do by the organization? So it becomes a fuller conversation, and I think really important when you're bringing in candidates of color into a space where they are going to be one or one of four. What are the other support structures that you're thinking about as an organization to provide them in order to be successful in their space?
Yeah, asking somebody to be the first, the only, the one of few is an ask, and people need to acknowledge that that is an ask. You are asking somebody to do a pretty big service on behalf of your organization, because you're going to still be figuring some stuff out, and they will unfortunately be your guinea pig for that. And there's just no way around that. So whenever you're thinking about inviting different types of people that haven't been invited into your organization at the staff level or maybe executive levels previously, you really need to be mindful of that. I usually try to clean my house before I invite people over. And I encourage us all to think about a hospitality frame of reference when we're thinking about diversifying your staff, right? So a lot of this, especially nowadays for me, is when I'm looking to engage with an organization, will I be comfortable? Will I be safe? I'm looking at your current staff. I'm looking at your board. I'm checking in with my friends that work in and around the area to understand what I can see what your PR version of yourself is, but I'm also looking at what is the POC network that has engaged with you, right? Like what are they going to say? I have told people to not apply for a job with my eyebrows, right?
Same.
Like,
When somebody's like,
I'm
hey,
gonna
what are you thinking
I'm gonna
about? What
apply
you
to
think
such and
about?
such, and I'm like,
Mom, that's good.
are you now? Is
I
that
mean,
what you're gonna do with your life? I mean, that's a
you
choice.
can.
Yeah. So,
Oh, my word.
it's about making sure that your organization doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, right? Like, I'm not saying you have to go and fix every scuff mark on the wall and every piece of paint, but
talk about it in the interview process. Be honest about it.
yeah, be honest. Listen, we're working on A, B, and C, and we're looking for somebody to join us on that journey. For most people in and around the field that are people of color, we're used to it to a certain extent. Like from grad school on up, I've had to explain what the hell Kanye West is at the water cooler because I was a comfortable person of color for them. And so, people bring their questions that they've always wanted to ask a Black person since the 80s, but just now finally found somebody that they feel comfortable asking. Some of this is part of being professionally socialized in the field. So it's something to be mindful of, but be purposeful in what it is that you're going to do. We do have one question before we move on. So the question was, the CEO of Wells Fargo recently expressed his concern relative to the limited pool of POC candidates. What are your thoughts relative to helping him and others with that mindset to recruit publicized positions opening? So even though it's it's afternoon now, but if we had had a couple drinks, my response would be he needs to be replaced because my God. But if I were being, paid and in a business suit and being, a little bit more polite about it, it would be that you definitely can't see what it is that you're not looking for. So in response to his comments, there were a number of people of color that work within the organization that said, I've routinely applied for upper management positions. I've tried to work my way up through this organization and have been denied. So there are POC candidates there. There are qualified POC candidates available. It's a matter of whether or not you're looking for them. And if you're being mindful of what they're telling you, implicitly or explicitly, if you routinely try to hire somebody that's a POC and you keep falling short, right? What are they telling you about the way in which your organization engages during the interview process, or what they've heard about your reputation for engaging people of color? What are they telling you by choosing to not go further with your organization?
You cannot find what you do not look for. I mean, anytime people say, "Oh, I can't find people,"
they usually
of color,
say it like this.
I'm like, "That's because you're not looking hard enough."
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So, people say a lot of things around me because I think they forget that I'm not white, which is fascinating. It's things like that. It's you need to try harder because they are out there. And then the second thing is then we really should ask ourselves, have we set up a system that invites candidates into the process? And it isn't just about within the immediate need. It's, we're looking at the full kind of feeder system, right? At what point do we back all the way up to 5th grade, which we know is when individuals are beginning to really think about what they want to be when they grow up. 5th grade. So if you want a strong, rich pool of candidates available to your organization, what investment are you making in the feeder system that brings in those diverse pools of candidates? I remember seeing on Facebook a meme that was like, if we want this, we need more of that. The underlying myth was that it was an orchestra on stage, all white. I blew it up just to make sure I wasn't like seeing something, then making it out, making something of something. All white. And the corresponding photo was music students who were also all white. And I'm like, yeah, to get that, you do need that, because that's how it works. And if we don't break that cycle, it's never going to look different. And in the hiring process, in the staffing process, in the feeder systems, who are you recruiting for interns? Who are you bringing in as advisors? If you don't break the cycle, if you don't break up who it is you're talking to, you're never going to see a change. And so it has to start in even just a bigger context than just your hiring process. Which brings us to our next section of talking about. So any other questions before we transition? I'm super comfortable with silence. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, the one thing that I will add is people are thinking if they have any questions or comments that they would like to make. Thinking about intersectionality is really important. So I've seen a lot of organizations that are just like, we're on our equity journey, and then it's an executive director position, and they're like, you know what, we went so far out of our way, we did not hire a white heteronormative male. We hired a white heteronormative male. Done.
Woo! Yeah.
Call it.
I'm a huge fan of Future is Female. But it can't just be white ladies.
Yeah, they're
Love
just like, we did it. Let's go get some pizza and a Coke and a smile. So thinking about like, okay, so we've got one spectrum of difference, and how can we incorporate some other pieces of difference? Yeah.
All right, so we want to talk just a little bit. I'm kind of noticing we went a little long on that section, but I think it's just a lot of who is in your organization that then also informs and guides the way that your organization talks to and with and about the community that it interacts with, but also how it represents itself in a genuine, authentic way. And so, some other things that we're seeing bubbling forward in this time is a lot of organizations reflecting on how they're using marketing and communications to convey their value system. And, a funny story, in the before times when we could all go to festivals and be outside and right up against each other, which now gives me hives when I think about it. Well, kind of gave me hives back then too, but I remember having a friend of mine, lovely Black woman, and her family, and she was going to come to one of our festivals when I was working in another city for another organization. And she said, hey, I know you're like in the organization. I don't know how much influence you have, but I just want to tell you, like, it's kind of cringy. And I'm like, what's cringy about? What's going on? And she's like, okay, so we've come to this thing before, and we know that you guys hire photographers, but can you guys like not follow us around? Is that okay? And I was like, I'm sorry, what the fuck, what? We're doing what? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I go, well, now that I think about it, oh my God, like you're in all of our promo pictures, and you're like in the background of this, and you're in the background of that. And, it's sometimes you're front and forward. And she's like, yeah, we're not the only, family of color that comes to your event. Like, can you not do that? And so, that really was a moment for me that I sat down with our marketing VP at the time, and I was like, hey, what are you telling the photographer? Because like, this is what's happening, and we can't have this. If we want to have more people of color come to our events, we need to think of a different strategy. And how about if we sit down and think about, where are we offering our programs? Where are we showing up? Where are we supporting communities to invite them to support us? And it kind of started, it took a really slow, I remember we were producing our annual report, and no representation, all white folks in the brochure. And I was like, okay, I know that like we had this really great program. Can we like feature one photo of some of the participants? And she did. and they were all facing a piece of art. So it was all of their like backs of their heads. And I was like, this is not what I meant. And so, you know, knowing that all of this has happened and it's kind of the dirty laundry we keep under the rug, which is why I don't say where and I don't say who and I don't say when. But I think it's important because these conversations should be happening. We should be in this moment, especially reflecting on our values, reflecting on how we're interacting and supporting our community and how we're talking about the way that we do it. You know, tragedy porn, poverty porn, and all of the things that we do that we talk about that we want to say, oh, look at how great and how amazing our organization is serving all of these underserved, under-resourced, at-risk people. And yet, there's other ways to talk about it. There's other ways to present, and there's other ways to share and highlight the authentic narratives of the people that we are in service to. And what we have found in this moment, so, you know, the pandemic has everybody on lockdown. We're a captive audience right now. And that coupled with the civil unrest that's been happening, a lot of organizations, you know, in June and following released statements in support of Black Lives Matter. A lot of organizations and, you know, service organizations are positioning and putting out, you know, these are the things that we're doing. And there was a really great update. I can't recall immediately who the organization was, that they were like, and here's where we are with what we've gotten done so far. And it's not a lot, but we just wanted to let you know we're still plugging away. And, you know, did you want to say something, Bria?
No, I was gonna put coffee in my face.
Okay, put coffee in your face and be ready. So, you know, it is a moment. It is a moment. And I think underpinning with the pandemic, the organizations that didn't have strong community relationships and didn't have strong ties to all of their community, I think are really the ones that will struggle more on the other side of this, because community is supporting and relying on the organizations that they had relationships with leading up to all of this. So if you haven't been reaching out to folks, if you haven't been thinking about, now is the time. 5 years ago was the time, but now is the time. And what's really fascinating about this moment is that it is a deep opportunity. And I wanted to keep all the opportunities to one section, but I'm going to bring this one a little bit. Is that because of the kind of enforced pause and not pause, we have a chance to think about, how do we want to come out of this? How do we want our community to remember us? How do we want our community to feel invited in the reentry process? Who is it that wasn't showing up before that we have an opportunity to invite in a different way when this is over? Because nothing is going to be the same. We desire a similarity, a familiarity, but, you know, consumer behavior research already is telling us that nothing is going to be the same. And we must think differently about where we're going to come out on the other side of this. And whether it's the way that we're designing and engineering our programming, whether it's the way that we're going to maintain hybridity between the digital and the live, whether it's finding different spaces, whether it's whatever that new iteration of your organization is going to be, now is the time that you're making that decision. We expect a lot of what we're experiencing right now to last for at least for the next 18 to 24 months. And we see that it kind of in the bigger industry, right? So we know travel and tourism's taking a hit, probably not going to come back. Drive market will very likely be the first things back in to the spaces, and your very local community. So hyper local is where I think we have a significant chance to use our marketing and communications to convey our value system, to invite and be welcoming, to prepare our community for reentry, and you know, really thinking about the authenticity of the things that we're saying about ourselves. You know, during the Black Lives Matter statement releases, there was a lot of kind of talking, because we know what organizations are like, because we talk to each other. And when
I mean, we don't
a
all know each other, but
we
we know
talk to
each
each
other.
other, but we know. Well, I mean, we know our organizations. We know, and when your organization is out in front, you know, touting its commitment to all this stuff, and you're not really doing any of the work, it's going to get out. And we've seen some of that happen, right? Like we saw leadership of the National Poetry Association, like they stepped down. Like there was some backlash that came out of what happened. But I think again, it's a moment to reflect. Do your words align with your actions? And if they don't, it doesn't mean that you fix your words. It means you fix your actions and you find a space to activate and be authentic in what you are portraying. We're all aspirational. And I think we all forgive that space because we're all growing. But if you're going to keep saying how much Black Lives Matter to you and then do nothing about that, that's going to get cashed in eventually.
Yep. So as somebody who has been that photographed kid, young adult, I will say that it is fatiguing, and it actually is harmful. I've gone through different phases of it as I've experienced it myself. So like I said before, I have a dance background. I used to be a dance team member, so like I have media training. And when I saw that camera out the corner of my eye, I used to like perk up and smile, Vaseline on the teeth, keep it moving. It got to the point where like, once I saw them, I would just sort of stick a finger in my nose or in my ear to ruin the shot. Cause you just, it really is harmful over time to be continuously exposed to that. And I'm not even saying the same organizations, different organizations over time. You know, when you're the diversity at the board meeting, when you're the diversity at the gala, you know, those cameras do tend to find you. When we think about authenticity and the idea of marketing and engaging with different audiences, now is a really good time. And we miss the dates a little bit, but atonement is, the time is now, friends. Like you can't just draw a line in the sand and say, we're starting today on our equity journey, and that means that everything that has happened before, we're just going to put behind this curtain and please don't ever reference it, and it doesn't exist. Okay, cool, let's go. You know, people are looking at, do you recognize if your organization has caused harm in the past? Do you recognize if your organization has been silent when it maybe should have spoken up? Because those are the things when I'm looking at if I'm going to be comfortable and safe engaging with an organization or the individuals within an organization, I'm looking at, do you understand what you've done in the past? Because if you don't, how are you going to change what you're going to do moving forward? There are going to be missteps in this work. Hiring side, marketing side, any sort of equity work, there are going to be missteps. What people in the communities that you're engaging with or want to engage with, what we are looking at, what I'm looking at, is what you do after you make that misstep, because it's the first failure. Everybody's going to have it. What do you do after that? That's going to let me know whether or not I want to keep engaging with your organization, or if you haven't learned the lesson yet and you need to go through another life cycle. Oh, there was a question about mentioning organizations such as New Jersey Arts Administrators of Color. What role are these organizations playing in networking with organizations and arts equity? So a lot of these spaces started out of a desire to be a community space where previously isolated artists and arts managers of color operating in these predominantly white spaces could get together and say, hey, I'm not crazy. You had this experience too. How do you navigate this? I need mentorship. I need somebody that understands the both sides of like wanting to learn how to mail merge finally, and also needing to navigate what happens by the water cooler, or what happens when I go away to conferences. So a lot of those spaces started from just wanting to build and create community. As they have evolved and developed, a lot of them are also interested in engaging with organizations to help them better be welcoming and inclusive to those that are a part of those networks. So that's where you have to have a salary range comes from. Some organizations offer training and training for, you know, people of color, and also Arts Administrators of Color offers accomplices training for, you know, people that don't identify as people of color to learn different ways to identify and dismantle inequity within their systems. Ruby, you can speak to your work with your network.
Yeah. So, you know, our network work has a long kind of deep root within the emerging leaders movement and has blushed out of that. So, you know, a lot of these affinity spaces start as a, you know, as Bria said, as a place for us to be in community together. We hosted a Leaders of Color forum, which is similar to the Executive Leadership Forum that Karen was able to join us and experience, that you know, offered this leadership professional development opportunity for individuals of color in the arts and culture field. And the thing that they all said, 17 of them in a room together, there was all of our facilitators, myself as the program designer, we were all people of color interacting in this space. And the thing that they all said at varying points of the experience and in subsequent survey responses was that it was wonderful to be in a space where they didn't have to defend or explain the experiences that they had had. Explain or defend.
Yep. I love it when I share an experience that I've had and somebody says, but I know them, they're a really nice guy. And it's like, I'm sure to you they were, but I sat here and just told you, okay, cool. So we're done here.
Thanks. All right. Right. And so, you know, so a lot of that has stemmed from this, and, you know, and the balance and the pressure back from, you know, white colleagues who I think genuinely want to be supportive, but just don't understand, like, every other space that we move in is designed for you, and very little is designed for us in the same way. So in 2018 in Denver, we did a affinity.
That was Denver? Wow, that was a while ago. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Right? No, thank you. Yep. Might have been 17, but Denver convention. And we partnered with the Arts Administrators of Color at the time, DMV. They've now expanded in a more national desire to serve network. And you know, following, we kind of sat down and said, okay, what are all of the things that we heard? And the session was designed around, tell us what the gaps are, tell us what you want, tell us what you need. And this is going to be a launch pad for us, both as a fellow network and as a national service organization. So, you know, we really felt that we had an opportunity to respond. And what came out of that for Americans for the Arts was the Arts and Culture Leaders of Color Network, which is non-member, member-based. It's housed on Facebook. It has a steering committee that is also made up of member, non-member. So it's one of our first kind of pilots into how do we balance member voices and service to the field, and how do we create spaces where we can, you know, bring in different voices. Also, you know, thinking about how is this group potentially a new network that we can share information with? How are these folks thought leaders that we can start bringing into other areas of the work? Are they, you know, when people say, do you know, is this now a group that we can tap and say, yes, we do, and create opportunities for them? And what also came out of that was the Leaders of Color Forum. So, you know, how are they informing it? They're informing it both passively and actively. You know, we listen to their feedback and use that to guide and inform the programming that we are generating and creating. When we have focus groups, when the joint councils get together, they're part of that conversation now. So there's a visibility, there's an awareness, there's an intentionality that that we move with in relation to our network. And then there's also the opportunities that we share as jobs come across my my plate, they go straight to the network. We don't allow white institutions or white colleagues into that group. And so I really try to act as a conduit, because I know that there's desire to interact with that group, but we are trying to maintain that space as safe for them to speak openly. Also, monitoring that we're not extracting information, that the information that's moving into the group is generative and beneficial. And so we also minimize the amount of like, hey, we're looking for this, or hey, someone's looking for that. There's other spaces for that stuff to happen, but that space is not that space. And so a lot of what we hear that they're talking about, or bringing in from other groups that they're talking with as well, is really informing these conversations. The fact that we're doing salary posting stemmed from conversations with the arts administrators of color and other folks in the field. So, sometimes these are the catalysts for change. So that's what I would share. Any other questions before we go on to our last section? All right, it is 12:30. I'm going to ask everyone to just take a deep breath with me. Raise your hands in the air to get a little bit of movement. One more.
I saw those Beyonce hair flips for those of you that took that route. I appreciate you.
I know, right? All right, now squint up your shoulders and relax them. Give them a roll back.
Can you tell Ruby comes from a performing arts background as well, friends?
Dancer, yo. Singer, performer, choreographer, all the things. But no, we've been on for a while, so I just want to make sure that we get a little motion going, because I don't know about y'all, but my days are Zoom marathons. So the kind of closing section that we wanted to part with was just to impart on all of you the excitement of opportunity in this moment. It is a shit show and a dumpster fire and all the plagues, all the Armageddon, all of the feelings that the world is about to end. And the reality is that it isn't. We are resilient. We are innovative, which I hate that word, but I think it's true. And we are creative. It is the foundation of our field. And in that, finding, when I find that I've gone too down deep the rabbit hole, and, there was really bad early on. So part of the disaster work, I think, had me analyzing and looking at the situation with a different pair of eyes back at the end of January. Most of y'all started paying attention about the beginning of March. Middle of March, everybody went home, and that's been that. But about the end of January, I started like, hey, disaster peeps, are you all seeing this too? Like, am I the only one? Oh no, I was not the only one, because folks who've been doing disaster work were on like, what is about to hit? And we're not ready for this. I'm like, no, we're not. And in those early months, February, March, April, people would say, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you about what I think, because you're not ready to hear what I think, because you're not there yet. You still have processing to do. Like, just get everybody home. Get your shit in order. Get everybody home. And now what I find when I'm still kind of in the early onset of like, oh, people don't get what's happening, or people don't know what's coming next. Right now it's everybody's talking about bankruptcies and closures and alternate paths to maintaining their business and what's going to happen next, is getting excited about what is possible right now. We have been changing and responding like champs. It is amazing. Like, I have no other word for it. It is amazing, because things that we said not 6 months ago now, this was back then, things we said a year ago, that is not possible. what? We can't do all of these things from home. We can't possibly produce all of this stuff on the internet. What nonsense? And funders have responded, well, we can't do operating support. We have to have a match. We must have an extensive final report. We must do all these things.
Or
And
some funders were like, let's go ahead and take that money from your equity initiative. I've seen a lot of organizations cancel out their equity initiatives. Their equity internship programming got cut short around March, April in a very sad wave of.
okay, we're talking opportunity right now, girl.
Sorry, I just want to hold y'all accountable. Do better.
I do too.
Sorry.
We'll get there. Just hold on. Don't be raining on my parade.
I did not mean to yuck
As
your
my
yum.
kids would say, don't yuck my yum. You just did it. Yep, don't yuck my yum, Mom. So I'm like, why are you putting ketchup on apples? So, not to bring the room down. But funders responded, right? So switching project support to operating support, eliminating the match, doing all of these great things. And now the opportunity is keep that up. Keep it up. What else can we do? Can we create easier application systems? Can we eliminate the panel? How do we fix the panel process? How do we fix the guidelines? How much can we direct deposit money to folks? There are so many things. And I say all of that because in this moment, that is the excitement. And some people think I'm crazy. Oh, I think Samir, you might need to mute. In this moment, I think that's people are like, that's kind of nuts. I'm like, no, all the crazy ideas right now, because everything is possible, because nothing is going to be the same. And what we do now sets the stage for what our tomorrow is going to look like. So now is the time to take a deep breath, leap off the cliff. It'll be fine. You will fly, you will float, you will hit the water. I see that. I see somebody flying. Yay! And know that you're not alone. I think the more that we can stick together and remind ourselves that we are the creative industry, we are based on imagination. Let's use that. Let's use that to guide a new path forward. And yes, there have been a lot of missteps, and there have been a lot of things that just have not gone well. And we're always going to have to weather that. That is just a part of the reality that we have to face and that we have to deal with.
What better time to course correct is
what better time to course correct?
Because you have a lot of time to reflect. People are telling you in real time when things are not working, and we are pretty, we're in a space right now, in a time right now where you can pretty readily see those direct lines and feel those direct lines of communications in ways that we weren't able to pre-pandemic, I think, because we are sitting right there and we're hearing it and you're taking it in. So if there was ever a time to course correct, now is it. And I'm really enjoying the organizations who are stumbling into equitable practices, helping people figure out
of the drunken stupor.
Yeah, helping people figure out how to work from home. And now all of a sudden you figure out ADA compliance to make your organization more equitable for people with various disabilities. You stumbled into greatness. So take the win, take all the wins.
Take the win. It is all good. The fact that we're doing this from home for the last heck long is just amazing, because everybody said we couldn't do it. We're a field, you can't do that. We can do anything. Hold my beer. So one of the things, because we're running out of time, and now I want to make sure that we have space for questions. The big thing that I wanted to share was just the Cultural New Deal, and that link was posted in the chat box earlier. Karen signed on, we signed on. The thing that makes that stand out in this moment right now is that it was developed and designed by communities of color, specifically with actionable steps that you can take as an organization. Are some of them aspirational? Absolutely, because none of us are perfect right now in this moment, and none of us will be perfect. We're all human. But what it does, that I think other documents and other manifestos and other, the edicts and statements and all the things hasn't quite done, is give you the specificity that a lot of us need, and us, I mean the general collective us, as a giant field, that we need to be able to find some place to start. So when we read the Cultural New Deal, as an so as kind of like the leaders in around that work inside the organization, once we said, yes, we're going to sign on to this, yes, all of these things are possible. We're not perfect. We're not in a great place. We're moving through it, but these are the things that we are going to commit to operationalizing. I went through and mapped every single action item to all of the departments that were impacted or directly affected by that particular line item. And now we've taken time to go back and say, okay, is everybody accounted for? Yes, okay. Organization, we've signed on to this, and this is where everybody sits. And so be mindful. We are gonna be checking in, because this is now, we are integrating this into our DNA. This is no longer a sidecar. This is no longer a checkbox. This is no longer things that we're just going to talk about. We're actually going to start doing it. And some of the things we do, like making sure that we are doing RFPs, that we are prioritizing, I don't like to use the word, but it is the legal term, minority-owned businesses, female-owned businesses, and so being able to even say, oh, and look, we're already doing this. This is great. Like, we just have to just keep going, is an opportunity. And I think as organizations, if you're all looking for ways to operationalize and maintain a focus and a commitment to equity, the Cultural New Deal is a really great roadmap for you. And I'm happy to chat with anybody if you've got questions. I would, also encourage you to reach out to the organizers. I think for us, from a how we're doing it is an interesting conversation, but they're also just amazing resources too. So
Ruby, I'm going to insert in
share
and
that.
expand on the minority-owned business thing while also
Yes.
answering a previous question.
I saw that question too. So.
Winning. Somebody asked who is considered white or who is considered POC. So a person of color is usually somebody who does not have the same access to privilege based on their race or ethnicity. So it's usually how people self-identify, with the caveat that you've seen in the news, the people who have tried to self-identify as something that they are not in order to try to have access to the trauma that they can then write scholarship about. I don't understand the logic behind it, but there are people that do try to claim marginalized status when they don't have it. But for most intents and purposes, race is considered the access privilege that comes with race ethnicity is on a spectrum, right? So there are people of color that might have lighter skin, which, it traditionally in our country, proximity to whiteness is usually better than not. So you have people that are considered biracial, which are, are still people of color, but might have some access and privilege that darker skinned people do not have in this country. So it's right? And can pass. So the idea of passing is, can somebody look at you and readily identify you as not white, and therefore make assumptions and marginalizations and blah, blah, blah based on that. It's a sliding scale. It definitely depends on where you are at. I think regionality makes a difference. Your geography makes a difference in the country as to who is considered what in which context. But people are largely put it upon to like self-identify. And there are so many other trappings that come along with it: cultural identity, what types of foods, what types of community practices and rituals are associated with your race ethnic identity. So it's a yarn ball of stuff. Usually by the time you're 3, I think the research shows somebody has told you, somebody has come and tapped you on the shoulder and been like, you're a person of color, enjoy this marginalization, or we don't see you as a person of color, enjoy some access to privilege.
And then realize in your late 30s, that's how people see you, and you have an identity crisis. For me, around the question, it's, there's a lot of the legalities of it is interesting too, because if you think about how we are represented on the census and how we're represented on school forms, I myself am full-blooded Mexican. And one would argue what that even means, because my mother's side of the family is mestizo and my father's side of the family is Mexican Indian. So technically, I'm not full-blooded, but I'm full-blooded. So, and then my children are biracial. So, that conversation, 2 of the 3 will definitely be identified as people of color. And the third one is going to have a really tough time explaining himself, because he is not going to be seen as a person of color, and yet have access to that culture and that experience as well. So, I think for me, the question is kind of hard to get into anything deeper, because in what use? Right? Are you thinking about demography? Are you doing a survey? Are you thinking about invitation? Are you trying to build relationships with a different community? And it's also helpful to ask how the community you're working with wants to be identified. Sadly, it is kind of fairly black and white. Like it's not.
We're in the country of a one-drop rule.
A person of color is a person of color. And it's how they identify, not how we identify them. So just some things to remember. We are at overtime.
Sorry.
Which I thought we would be undertime. So I was always panicking about that too.
Ruby, stop.
Sure. Hopefully we leave you with inspiration, action, motivation, excitement, and a little bit of sobering reality. Bria, thank you so much for always.
Thanks, Ruby.
Such a great
let's all Zoom clap here. Thank you so much, Bria and Ruby. This was really wonderful, and there were so many takeaways from today. And there's lots of good things in the chat of people really resonating with things you said. One of the things you said that really connected to me was it's okay to not have the answers, but it's not okay not to try. And so I'm just really excited to have experienced this with you guys, and to know that you are a resource for SJCA as we try to have integrity of holding ourselves accountable and looking inside as an organization to what we're doing this year, and trying to make sure that we have growth, and also looking outward of how can we support this region, and really making sure that all of you have the resources you need to go through this process, which again, thank you so much for everything and the guidance that you gave us. I do want to put a plug in. I know Julie put it in the chat, so thank you, Julie, but encourage you to stay connected to us. The SJCA website, which is sjca.net, has a lot of resources, but also has more information about membership. If you're interested in getting involved with the board or anything else, you can certainly reach out to me, reach out to Karen and Julie, which just shout out to both of them. We have 2 phenomenal staff people stewarding this organization. Speaking of people, we did the poll for ratifying the board, and the slate was unanimously approved. So thank you for everyone weighing in on that. I guess that means I get to officially have this job. And congratulations to all of our other new officers. And I just would like to welcome again Samir and Bill. We do have a board meeting this afternoon, so we'll invite you and make sure you know if you can attend that. That's great. But as we all leap off this cliff together, I just want to reiterate that you aren't alone. SJCA is here for you and for you, and hopefully as we work towards this world of being actually authentically equitable and inclusive, it will be by you as well through this coming year. So thank you to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay in touch with us. Julie and Karen will send out information about our next monthly meeting, which will be, we have these virtual sessions each month with also great speakers. So you'll get information about that in our monthly newsletter and stuff. So stay in touch. Have a great week. Happy end of September. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.